It was 20 years ago at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, where two seniors, Harris and Dylan Klebold, walked into their school with weapons and bombs, killing 13 and wounding dozens. In the months and years that followed, researchers began to ask what was going on inside their heads, and how did the world around them contribute? Why did schools suddenly become a battleground of identity and rage? Over the last few decades, dozens of school shootings in America and beyond have forced us to look deeper at the psychological and environmental roots of such violence. And yet, even with all the data and headlines, the basic everyday question remains: how does a teenager go from feeling powerless or invisible to holding lethal power in their hands? In the case of Columbine, Harris and Dylan weren't just two names in a police report, they became symbols and distorted reflections of a generation quietly boiling under the surface. What they did on April 20th, 1999 wasn't spontaneous. It was rehearsed, written, filmed, and even philosophically justified, at least in their own minds. In the months before the shooting, both boys recorded hours of what became known as the basements. Sitting in a dimly lit room, surrounded by guns, ammunition, and blueprints, they spoke directly to the camera, laughing, cursing, promising chaos. Eric said in one of the tapes, "It's going to be like the LA riots, the Oklahoma bombing, World War II, Vietnam, Duke, and Doom all mixed together." Dylan, on the other hand, mostly just listened, adding quiet and uncertain comments. It was like watching two parallel psyches orbiting around the same darkness. Psychologists later described Eric as a textbook psychopath, intelligent, manipulative, lacking empathy, and fully aware of what he was doing. Dylan, on the other hand, appeared deeply suicidal, depressed, and emotionally unstable. Together, they formed a psychological equation. One wanted control, the other wanted escape. But beneath the horror lies something disturbingly human. Both just wanted to be seen. Their journals were filled with phrases like, "I hate the human race," and "I don't belong here." They wanted their suffering to be known and echo beyond the loneliness of their bedrooms. This is where Columbine becomes less an event and more a philosophy of resentment. A rebellion against a world that, in their eyes, ignored them. In their writings, they talked about natural selection and revenge against the weak-minded masses. These were the words of young men trying to sound significant in a world that made them feel microscopic. Eric's writing read like manifestos of dominance. He compared himself to God, claiming he had the right to decide who lives and dies. Dylan's writing, meanwhile, read like poetry, fragmented, emotional, filled with longing. He wrote things like, "I'm so lonely without someone to love me. My existence is a tragedy." And yet, despite the clear signs of illness and alienation, the systems around them never noticed. Teachers described them as normal. Classmates remembered them as weird but harmless. Even their parents didn't know the full extent of what was coming. They bought their guns legally through friends. To everyone else, they were just teenagers. What makes this the turning point isn't just the act, it's the blueprint they left behind. Columbine became a cultural template, consciously or not, for dozens of shootings that followed. It's here that the story of Columbine stops being about two boys and starts being about us. About how society interprets pain, masculinity, isolation, and fame. Because the truth is, they didn't just want to die. They wanted the world to remember them. They wanted control over their own narrative, even if that meant ending everyone else's. A former FBI profiler once said, "Every school shooter since Columbine has wanted to be more famous than the last." And in a way, they got exactly what they wanted. Their names, their faces, their story, studied, dramatized, replayed. That's the sinister genius of their design. Even in death, they achieved the power they felt denied in life. When you think about it, the turning point of this story isn't April 20th. It happened months before when two boys sitting in a basement looked into a camera and decided that destruction was the only way to matter. But the disturbing thing about it is that the world that produced those two boys wasn't weird at all. It was very normal. Rows of lockers, hallway chatter, cafeteria pizza. It was the kind of place where you could walk in any morning and think, nothing bad ever happens here. The late 1990s were supposed to be a golden age. America was doing well, technology was booming, and the internet had just started making its way into bedrooms. But under that optimism, something subtle was shifting. For the first time, teenagers were living half their lives in another world, one without teachers or parents or boundaries, a place where frustration could grow quietly unseen. Back then, schools were built around openness. Big windows, long corridors, the idea that safety came from visibility, that if everyone could see each other, nothing bad could happen. It was a design built on trust. But after Columbine, that trust began to vanish. Metal detectors appeared where murals used to hang, security cameras sprouted from ceilings, teachers started locking doors not to keep students in, but to keep danger out. For kids born after the year 2000, drills became as normal as math tests. It's strange to think about. My generation learned about fire drills. The next learned how to survive gunfire. Before, schools were stages for growing up, for awkward crushes, for bad haircuts, for learning who you were. Now they're also stages of fear. You can see it in how students move, the way some of them sit closer to doors, the way teachers check hallways before starting class. It's subtle, but it's there, always humming underneath the sound of the school bell. Once upon a time, schools were built to turn kids into citizens, thinkers, dreamers. Now, they're built to prevent tragedy. The architecture of hope has quietly turned into the architecture of defense. We wanted to make schools safer, and we did in some ways, but we also made them colder. Every door we locked shut out a little more connection. Every new rule about zero tolerance pushed away the very students who needed help the most. The quiet ones, the strange ones who didn't fit. We learned how to secure buildings, but we forgot how to reach people. Eric and Dylan lived in a time before any of this existed. There were no social media warning signs, no counselors trained to interpret online posts. They slipped through unnoticed. Today, we've built entire systems to detect the same patterns, algorithms that flag dangerous words, protocols for behavioral threat assessments, yet we're still missing the human part. A message written online at 2 a.m. can be seen by millions, but somehow no one close ever seems to see. Technology can detect danger, but it can't replace empathy. Even the way we talk about school shootings has changed. Columbine stunned the world, endless news coverage, months of national mourning. Now, they happen so often that people can name them by place. Sandy Hook, Parkland, Uvalde. It's like a grim language we all somehow understand. The shock fades faster each time, replaced by a numb kind of acceptance. I've spoken to students who tell me they don't even get scared during drills anymore. They say it's just normal. Imagine that practicing for mass death is now deemed normal. I think the problem isn't just guns, it's what's happening inside people. Wherever connection breaks down, something else fills the space. Anger, loneliness, or the belief that violence makes you visible. I once saw footage of a school built before Columbine. It had wide hallways, colorful banners, sunlight pouring through glass walls. You could feel the optimism in the design. Then I looked at a modern high school built after it. Heavy doors, tinted windows, reinforced corners. It's safer, sure, but it looks more like a bank than a place where kids go to learn about the world and make new friends. It's a small thing, but architecture reveals belief. We used to believe children needed space to explore. Now we believe they need walls to protect them. We can stop someone from bringing a gun through the door, but how do we stop someone from wanting to? That's the quiet tragedy of this contrast. We made schools harder to enter, but in doing so, we also made them harder to belong to. We built systems that prevent harm, but not ones that heal it. And maybe that's the story here. The world before Columbine trusted its children. The world after it fears them. When you start to look at it that way, it becomes hard not to see the same patterns repeating, just in softer forms. The need to be seen, the urge to matter, the desperation to make some kind of impact, no matter how distorted it looks, that hasn't gone away. It's just moved online. Today, instead of a journal hidden under a bed, we have timelines. Instead of a manifesto written on paper, we have tweets, TikToks, Discord messages. Our digital selves have become both confession and performance places where we reveal pain, but also disguise it. And the line between seeking help and seeking attention has never been thinner. In a way, the psychology that drove school shooters 20 years ago is now woven into the fabric of online life. This idea that visibility equals existence, that to be unseen is to be nothing. And that, somehow, any attention is the cure. When you scroll through your feed, it's not hard to notice it. The competition for outrage, for sympathy, for validation. The same algorithms that connect us also reward our darkest emotions. Anger spreads faster than empathy, and negativity gets more engagement than understanding. And in the world where fame is the most important currency, people will do anything to be noticed. That's the chilling legacy of Columbine. Not the act itself, but the idea that you can force the world to remember you through destruction. It planted a seed in the cultural imagination. If no one listens when you whisper, maybe they'll listen when you scream. And the systems we've built don't help much. Schools try to treat mental health like a box to check mindfulness workshops, occasional assemblies, but the truth is, no system can substitute for connection. Online, we've traded communities for crowds. In real life, we've replaced friendship with convenience. We text instead of talk. We react instead of listen. And every time we do, we drift a little further apart. The irony is, we are more connected than ever, and yet more alone than any generation before us. And that's not just a poetic statement, it's a measurable fact. Surveys across multiple countries show record levels of reported loneliness among teenagers and young adults. They're growing up in a digital hall of mirrors surrounded by people, but constantly comparing themselves to versions of others that aren't real. And when you live long enough in that kind of world, invisibility starts to feel like suffocation. You can almost understand in a dark way why someone would rather be feared than forgotten. That's why experts talk about the contagion effect, how every mass shooting spawns, echoes, copycats, people who see themselves in the perpetrator's pain. No one wants to be a killer, they just want to be remembered. That's how desperate the human need for meaning has become. So the question becomes, what do we do about it? Because you can't regulate loneliness, you can't legislate belonging, and you can't filter despair with algorithms. Maybe the answer isn't another law, or another lockdown drill, or another round of outrage on social media. Maybe it's quieter than that. Maybe it's just about noticing people. Again, really noticing them. Looking up from screens, asking how someone is, and meaning it. Teaching young people not just how to stay safe, but how to stay connected. There's a reason every expert says prevention starts with listening, because before violence ever makes a sound, it's silence that does the damage. And the only thing that cuts through silence is presence. If Columbine was the warning, then our digital world is the echo, repeating the same cry in 1,000 different voices, each one asking the same thing. Do you see me? And maybe, if we start answering that question genuinely, compassionately, humanly, we won't have to keep asking how to stop these tragedies, because they won't need to happen for people to feel seen.